So before we get started though on the demonstration, because I have a particular technique I want to show off to you guys today, does anyone have any thoughts that they want to share? Does anyone want to ask me any questions about maybe Slam Academy or anything that's going on in your life about music? No?
Mm,
Okay. How was your
I have a
break, guys?
question.
Yeah, Maria, hi, how are you?
Good.
Good. Hi. It's nice to hear you.
Uh, yes. Actually, I have a question, but it has nothing to do with music production, but it's more like mixing.
Cool.
Um, I'm planning on taking a class, a university, like the entrance exam.
Hmm.
But so one of the exam is actually be able to mix an audio for 20 minutes, and I haven't really see for myself like how a mixer board look like in real life. So far, I've only been doing with software,
Hmm.
and I've never really touched any hardware in a mixing studio.
Sure.
So, is there like an advice on what to expect? Like, what is the best way to practice? I mean,
Sure. Is is the scenario, are they going to have you in a studio and they're going to park you at an actual mixing desk and have a band playing and you're going to have to like mix the band? Is that what's going on?
yeah, they will gonna present me with an audio stems, and then they will actually give me 5 minutes of a finished song,
Mhm.
which all the what all the audio stems is was
Okay.
in,
Sure.
and then they will ask me to use the same audio stems to create something that is represent my own like represent who I am,
Sure.
like telling them who I am, and from mixing. So.
Right. How to prepare for that? I think the technical answer is it depends on what kind of equipment that you're going to be using. Oftentimes, I mean, in the world of doing a mix down in an actual recording studio situation, you have to know the board. Because every different console has different monitor modes and different kinds of routing situations. But if you're going to be able to work with your own equipment, um, it's tough to say without hearing the tune. I think that, you and I, Maria, have gone over the kind of mixing channel strip and those five devices in a row, starting with subtractive EQ. I can
Mm.
reshare that spreadsheet with you if you wanted. And I know that's just a spreadsheet. It doesn't really give you any real creative stuff to chew on, but it's at least a good jump off point for how pretty much all sounds should be processed in order to fit them into a mix with other sounds.
Mhm.
And I mean, I think if I was given stems in 20 minutes, the first thing I would do is I'd put a subtractive equalizer on every single sound pretty much, and I'd scoop out all the stuff I don't want, making sure everything fits. And then I would turn everything all the way down. And I'd turn up
All faders.
all the faders all the way down after I have an EQ on everything. And I would turn up the kick and the bass and get them to sound great with about 6 dB of headroom on the overall mix. And then I would go outwards to the less important sounds as far as the rhythm section are concerned, like percussion and any sort of stabs or hooks and stuff, and start building the pyramid around the kick and the bass after I've EQ'd everything. And in 20 minutes, if you follow that, I mean, you'll at least be making improvements and you won't be wrecking anything. The way that you could screw it up is by using compressors, you know, and not being able to hear it very loud. People over compress things all the time because they're not turning it up really loud and they can't really hear the bass anyway, and they don't. So I'd say avoid compression unless you're absolutely sure you need it.
And that is pretty basic, right? But I mean, I was just thinking like, how do I make it mine? Like, I'm not sure. Like, well, they say is that to make sure that like maybe you will decided to just turn off one of the tracks, or just maybe leave out only two tracks playing the whole time. It's like I'm just not sure. Like, I mean, on creativity session, like you produce a music, you probably can get the artistic
Of
choice.
course.
But on mixing, I'm just not sure how do you make your own voice through mixing and like a track. So.
Here's my last bit of advice for this is that once you do the EQ and the levels and you want to put your own personal character touch on the mix, what you do is you break the song up into verse, chorus, verse, and you find those chorus sections and you go heavy on time-based effects. That's how you make it feel like it's yours. If it's like the verse and the person's like singing a song about their dog, you don't want to like throw a bunch of delay on there to make it feel like it's yours. You know what I mean? You're going to be like screwing up the tune. But if you get to that part where there's a chorus and there's backing tracks or whatever, that's when you go like heavier on the effects, turn stuff down, but lay on the time-based effects a lot more, like reverbs and delays and phasers and choruses. That's going to help when that chorus hits is when the producer gets to have a voice. You know, when the singer-songwriter is singing about their dog, the producer's job is to like get out of the way. You know, but when the chorus hits, generally in the pop song at least, or in most music, is really when it gets big and lush. And that's now when the engineer and producer gets to flex their muscles a little bit and kind of put their own creative thumbprint on the tune.
Okay.
Cool. So hopefully those tips are helpful for you guys. And we're just wrapping. I love your questions, Maria. They're always so thoughtful. So thanks. Any other cool music production related questions? Anyone have any projects that they're working on that they find frustrating or exciting they want to share with the group? Because if there's nothing else, I'm going to get into the technical part of this demonstration. I really would like to get this knocked out in about 15 or 20 minutes. Very recently, I was asked a really cool question about resonance and creating harmonics and stimulating harmonics in sound, in any sound. And what really is music? What is the difference between a sound that is just a bunch of crust or elements that are disparate and something that actually feels musical? And the real answer to this, I feel like, on a lot of context is harmonics. Some sounds have, I mean, every sound has a different timbre, and what timbre really is broken down to on a physics level is where are those harmonics, how loud are they in relation to the fundamental pitch. And I wanted to come up with a way that we could artistically sculpt sound the same way that like a painter dumps paint on the canvas. And so for me, I wanted to employ harmonics and be able to like freely paint with harmonics, kind of in the same way that the Resonator device does inside of Live. But I feel like that device is a little limited in like how it works, because everything is tempered, even temperament, and you can detune things, but it's kind of guesswork. Not the kind of guesswork that I really like so much either. So I'm going to share my screen here. Looks like I have the Slam Academy website open. Wow, they have online classes? Wow. World's best interactive online classes in sound design, Ableton. There's also free short classes in sound design or other cool topics, so just check us out. There's my plug. Let's open up Live and let's build a rack that it can help us turn any sound into music. This is just kind of my idea. I want to start with a car crash, or maybe my own voice, or maybe just some white noise, and I want to orchestrate that thing in the same way that, like, you know, you could if you were playing a violin, possibly. So a technique that I really like for this experimental sound design stuff is resampling silence. Whenever I want to get started on creating an interesting effect rack, I usually like starting with white noise. The reason why is because just noise, it doesn't really have any pitch at all. It's just random frequencies. Sometimes it's hard to generate that and have it be unique, because synthesizer white noise is just pure random frequencies at a fixed amplitude. It doesn't have any color. It's kind of boring. So what I just did was I just recorded a bunch of silence onto the track by clicking on one of these circles and engaging record. Now I'm just going to grab maybe like one bar and hit Command L to loop it. And now I'll just come over to my clip volume right away, and this is total alchemy. So if you're trying to produce like Janet Jackson sounding music, this is a technique you probably don't want to show your friends. But what I'm doing here is I turn clip volume up, and so it looks like the meter's getting hot here, and I'm also going to grab my utility effect here, and I'm going to add more gain until it looks nice and juicy. Making sure it's not clipping, I turn it up, and once it's sounding good, I control click and I just freeze the track. Then I flatten it, and as you can imagine now I have this big chunky looking noise floor that I can play around with and apply effects to, and maybe even turn into music if I do this right. Let's listen to it by itself. I'm going to need to do a brief moment of routing. So here's my white noise. As you can hear, there's basically no music to this thing at all. If I wanted to just grab that Resonator device I mentioned earlier, I could simply add harmonics. So that's pretty sweet. It's basically a bunch of bandpass filters that are self-oscillating, like very narrow Q, and then some delay right after those bandpass filters. This is a really neat effect, but I also find it a little limiting. Let's take a little deeper look at how we can customize that device and build it ourselves and make it more interesting. Here's a bandpass filter, just like I said the resonator has. So this is pretty straight ahead. I can put a delay after it, take it out of sync, turn the feedback up, and I've got a resonator pretty much right here. So if I knew what frequency was what note, like for instance 264 is a C, I could type that in here, and this is now a C. And I can affect its overtone content by choosing what kind of delay time I want right here. So let's go up to a different frequency. How about 528? It's also C. Or 1056. So the cool thing about this now is I can tune this to notes just like the resonator was, and I can add my own custom delay time. But I can do more interesting stuff than this. For instance, I could control click on the delay and put it in repitch mode. That's now going to make it work like a tape delay. I could also add LFO modulation to the filter. These are two things I can't do with the Ableton Resonator. Watch what happens when I do this now. So that's a resonator. It's pretty cool. But the reason why the Ableton Resonator has 5 particular bands that are all tuned is because you have 5 fingers in your hand, and maybe if you're really laying down some humongous chord, you might want to be able to tune each of those notes. So let's go ahead and group this auto filter and put a few of them in parallel. So I think what I'm going to do first is get my macros going, and I'm going to send this up to macro 1. I'll call this thumb. We're saying treble clef, okay? So the next one I'm going to duplicate, and I'll call this pointer. And I'll macro map this to 2. Then I'll duplicate again, rename this one middle, macro map that to 3, and so on. Let's do a ring finger. Let's call 4 enough. Geez. Ring. Okay. So now we have these non-musically tuned, just arbitrary frequency controls, but they're in parallel. And then we have this one global delay. If I wanted to have macros to control this delay too, what I'm going to need to do is shift click on this. I'm going to call this here my filter bank. And now I'll shift click and group these together. And now I have new macros that can control my delay as well. So let's try it. We'll go feedback and time. I'll do those on the bottom ones. Time, feedback. I'm just going to send these straight out. So this is one of the many ways that we could create our own custom little resonator and apply it to anything to get music happening. Let's see what happens here. I'm going to keep in mind the natural overtone series, the harmonic series, and the way it works at integer numbers. So maybe I'll go 130 to keep things easy. 260, there's an octave. 390, there's a perfect fifth. And here we could just go like 1K, 1.3K. Oh, fun. I can hold shift to fine tune these. Now I can add my delay. So the next thing I'd probably do to this, just to make it a little more fun, is I'd give myself a global LFO control. So with all of these, I'm going to send LFO amount down to 8, and I'll dump that out to the master too. There's so many different options of ways you could really evoke this, but let's send this here to 5, and we'll call this spread. So there are a million ways you could make this more interesting. You could put volume control for maybe everything but the thumb. That could be neat. So that's one idea. You could also constrict the ranges of all of these by hitting mapping mode and customizing their frequency range, because maybe 20 hertz and 20K is too much. If you really called this a thumb and pointer and middle finger, maybe they'd have different ranges, kind of crescendoing, or I should say cascading across the key range. These are just ideas, but this is a resonator. Let's try and put it on my voice and see what happens. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear me. So now I've got a bypass chain and a wet chain right here. So this is a way now that we could put this device in parallel and mix it with the dry signal of whatever's on the track. Another really cool way you could use it is by putting it on a return track. This could be a neat way to access it from any set or any sound in your session. Let's try and throw a drum beat in here and see what happens. Check out what it does to my bass. Here's none. Here's width. I like that. Let's see what it does to some percussion. Pretty cool, huh? So this is a really nice way to add musicality and resonance and harmonics to anything. And this is still just noise, because I was just turning this with my ears. That's usually how I get the best results anyway, versus if I'm actually counting numbers and calculating like a dork. So listen to this. This is a great way to add a little life to your track and to get away from just having these plunking individual synth sounds, and to get away from synth programming. Just get a little sine wave going and now start to get creative with your effects. So in the end here, I'd call this Resonator Builder or something, and I'd save it into my library. So that's my approach. Does anyone have any questions about that technique? It's pretty cool. I made a video that's available on my website that covers this as well, so if you want to go over any of that, you can check it out. It's on the Slam Academy website, surprisingly enough, and I can just go to online classes. It's all right here. Ableton Online, right there. Here we go. Cool. So you can just go videos, and here's the DIY Resonator video. It'll cover all those steps, and actually I'll, in the end of this video, get to apply it to some synthesizer patches and a couple other more maybe interesting bits of content so we can see how it actually, what kind of results it can generate. Cool. So that's a fun exercise, I think. Does anyone want to add on to it or show me how you could make it better? There are a lot of ways.
Well, I actually used that simple delay but I didn't use it together with auto filter. I
Hmm.
just make a chain and then add like 10 millisecond for each of them just to get a spring
Nice.
reverb effect. I guess that's what you call it.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's like
but I
almost like,
never really tried with auto filter, so maybe I should.
because then it would be like a spectral spring reverb, you know?
Yes, yes,
Yep. And
something like
then
that.
what you might even do is, let's do that really quick. So, like if I took this percussion sound and I put an auto filter and a simple delay on here, and we put this in bandpass mode, and then we maybe link this. Ever play around with this repitch? I love this technique. Group these together. Now, what I'd probably do, aside from probably the obvious of having a cutoff control for kind of combing around on my track, and then a feedback for how much flanger or whatever we want. Take this out of sync. Now what I'd probably do is control click and make a dry chain. Call this wet, and then I'd put the volume for the wet mix on a macro. So now let's put this right on my track. So now we can hear it if I just do this, and it should be pretty much working now. So right now it's like a combing filter because my milliseconds are so short. Let's go ahead and put that on a macro too. So it'll be like a spring reverb out here. But once you get below about 30 milliseconds, it's going to start phasing and creating more of a combing filter, especially if you have the feedback turned up. It doesn't really comb until you crank the feedback. So now we could get a spectral combing filter. So this could be pretty cool. Just an idea.
Can you make them like the wet like a six chains of the wet and then just add 10 millisecond for each of them, so like the first one will be 10 and then the second one will be 20 and
Sure.
so on, or it could even be faster, like 10 and then 15 and then 20 and
Totally.
25.
I love that. That's a great idea. I'm not going to demonstrate that though, but that's a great idea. Another reason to kind of cascade those values up here in your macro mappings so then they always land on intelligible or logical, you know, ranges. So that's a cool one though. I like that idea of layering those. That's fun. You know, for me, I like having all the filters in parallel and then just having one delay on the end that's on the outside of the parallel racks, because I feel like having a discrete delay on every chain, especially if the macros are all mapped to the same knobs anyway, it's either a chance for things to get sloppy, which maybe could be cool, but maybe not. And also it's unnecessary CPU load if they're all doing the same thing. So, you know, I just pull that one of them out and then group, yeah, and then group it to this whole thing. Cool. Transformers, check out that movie, or just don't watch movies and make music instead. That's what I do. So I've heard of the Transformers though.
I watch all of them, so
Yeah, I know. You're a movie buff. I love that about you. I gotta follow your tips and check out all those Ghost in the Shell movies. I've only seen one of them, but thanks for the tips, Maria.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Maria, you are going to get a job as a teacher at some really cool music school someday if you're not too famous making beautiful art and sharing it with the world. I can't wait till that happens.
I don't think I have the patience to be a teacher. I yell a lot, so
You've been pretty patient with me so far, so that's beautiful. That takes some serious cred, as my
yeah.
close partners in the room can testify to. So, so I think this has been a pretty good hangout. We hit 30 minutes right on the dime. Hopefully, you know, you guys are feeling like James Patrick and everyone around you is here to help you make music and help you have fun in your creative endeavors. I know that I get really, really discouraged thinking about the grind and the capitalist driven world that we all live in nowadays. And music for me is an escape from all of that. And I want to share that escape route with all of my students. And I feel like these kinds of direct communications are the most effective possible ways to help save you from the grind. And even if you end up going and getting a job that you hate from 9 to 5, right at 5:01, you're free and you're making music and you've got your escape route. So let me hopefully help have an impact on your life through these kind of weird creative hangouts. And I'm going to keep doing them every week. Hopefully you guys keep coming through.
Thanks a lot, James.
It's my pleasure. Cool. So I don't know. If no one else has anything else to share. I guess I'll just say thanks and stay tuned for more of these.
Thanks, James.
Yep. Just so you guys know, part of the reason why I'm doing this is, of course, to develop my own project, Slam Academy. But another really important reason why I want to do it is because many of you are about to graduate from my other programs, and I want to have a channel open to be able to still be a part of your lives. You know, I've had hundreds of students who I love and I never see again after they graduate. And to me, I'm not doing this, I'm doing this because I really believe in the relationship and human connectivity side of life. It's my escape route, like I was just saying. And so I want to have a channel that I can preserve with my students and with my friends, you guys, and hopefully we can stay a part of each other's lives indefinitely.
Thanks a lot. You're a great teacher, definitely. I don't think I've met any other teacher that will dedicate their life or their time to, to their past student. Usually they just want to focus on the recent student or future students.
Well, hopefully, let's take advantage of this channel. Thank you, Maria, because if I do this and then nobody shows up, I'll be like, yeah. So let's keep hanging out, you guys. We got this GoToMeeting thing going. I'm going to figure out how to get that noise floor lower on my Soundflower. That routing is so bad. But, one step at a time. Thanks for your patience. And a big high five to all the music lovers in the world.
Yeah.
All right. Talk to you guys soon.